The morning mist hung low over Buckingham Palace as Detective Inspector James Mitchell adjusted his red uniform one last time. After 15 years of loyal service to the Crown, he never imagined this Tuesday would be his last day as a royal guard. The gold buttons on his jacket caught the early sunlight, and his black bearskin hat sat perfectly straight, just as it had every day since he first took the oath to protect the royal family. James had always been different from the other guards. While they stood motionless for hours, he observed everything. His detective training before joining the Royal Guard made him notice things others missed. The way certain staff members whispered in corners. How some visitors carried themselves with unusual confidence. The small details that didn't quite fit the perfect picture of royal life. That morning started like any other. The changing of the guard ceremony went smoothly. Tourists snapped photos, and the palace grounds buzzed with their usual activity. But James noticed something odd. A man in an expensive suit had been lingering near the gates for 3 days straight, not taking pictures like a tourist, not waiting to catch a glimpse of royalty, just watching, studying, making mental notes. During his afternoon shift, James saw the same man talking quietly with one of the senior palace staff members. Money changed hands quickly, so fast that most people would have missed it. But James didn't miss anything. He made a mental note of the staff member's face and decided to investigate later. The palace had always been full of secrets, but James had learned to separate harmless gossip from potentially dangerous information. This felt different, more serious, more threatening to the very foundation of everything he had sworn to protect. As evening approached, James was called to a private meeting with King Charles himself. This was unusual. Guards typically only spoke with the king during formal ceremonies or emergency situations. James walked through the ornate corridors, his footsteps echoing off the marble floors, wondering what could be so important. King Charles sat behind an antique desk in his private study, looking tired and troubled. The room smelled of old books and expensive tobacco. Portraits of previous monarchs watched from the walls, their painted eyes seeming to judge everything that happened in their presence. Detective Inspector Mitchell, the king began, his voice carrying the weight of authority and something else. Worry, perhaps, or fear. I've been told you've been asking questions about certain staff members and visitors. James stood at attention, choosing his words carefully. Your Majesty, I've observed some unusual activities that concerned me. As your guard, I felt it was my duty to remain vigilant. The king's expression hardened. Your duty is to stand guard and follow orders, not to conduct unauthorized investigations into palace affairs. Some matters are beyond your understanding or clearance level. With respect, Your Majesty, if there are threats to your safety or the security of the palace, shouldn't I be aware of them? I've served faithfully for 15 years. My record is spotless. King Charles stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. For a moment he seemed lost in thought, perhaps weighing his options. When he turned back to face James, his decision was clear. Detective Inspector Mitchell, your services are no longer required. You are hereby dismissed from the Royal Guard, effective immediately. You will surrender your uniform, your credentials, and any palace property before leaving today. You are also bound by the Official Secrets Act regarding anything you may have seen or heard during your service. The words hit James like a physical blow. 15 years of dedicated service, and he was being dismissed for doing his job too well. Your Majesty, surely there's been a misunderstanding. If I've overstepped, I apologize, but the decision is final, King Charles interrupted. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. I trust you understand the serious legal consequences of discussing palace matters with anyone outside these walls. As James was led away by security, his mind raced. The dismissal felt rushed, desperate even. What had he stumbled onto that was so dangerous the king himself had to personally fire him? The man at the gates, the money changing hands, the nervous behavior of certain staff members. It all pointed to something bigger than simple palace gossip. In the guards' quarters, James packed his few personal items while 2 security officers watched his every move. His fellow guards avoided eye contact. Either out of sympathy or fear, that association with him might cost them their jobs too. The silence was deafening. As he handed over his uniform and credentials, James felt like he was losing part of his identity. The red fabric that had been his second skin for 15 years was now just cloth. The badge that had granted him access to one of the most secure buildings in the world was now just metal. Walking out of Buckingham Palace for the last time as an employee, James passed the same spot where he'd seen the mysterious man and the staff member exchange money. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was being punished for trying to protect the very institution that was now casting him out. But James wasn't just any dismissed employee. He was a trained detective with 15 years of inside knowledge about how the palace operated. He knew the schedules, the security protocols, the staff hierarchies, and most importantly, he knew when something wasn't right. As he reached the palace gates, James made a decision that would change everything. Instead of quietly disappearing and accepting his dismissal, he would find out what was really going on. Whatever secret was so dangerous that it cost him his career might be dangerous enough to destroy the monarchy itself. The game was just beginning, and James Mitchell was no longer playing by the palace rules. He had nothing left to lose and everything to uncover. The very people who had dismissed him had no idea that they had just created their most dangerous adversary. Someone who knew their secrets and was no longer bound by loyalty to keep them. 3 days after his dismissal, James Mitchell sat in a small cafe across from Buckingham Palace watching the gates he used to protect. His civilian clothes felt strange after 15 years in uniform, but they gave him the freedom to move around London without being recognized as the recently fired Royal Guard. He had spent the previous days thinking carefully about his next moves. Going to the press immediately would be foolish. They would demand proof he didn't have yet. Contacting his old detective colleagues might work, but palace influence reached far into law enforcement. He needed to be smart about this. James had already started connecting dots from his years of service. The mysterious man at the gates wasn't the first suspicious visitor he'd noticed. Over the past year, there had been several meetings between palace staff and people who didn't fit the usual profile of royal business associates. These weren't diplomats, charity workers, or government officials. They were something else entirely. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or face consequences." James smiled grimly. Someone was already worried about what he might discover. That meant he was on the right track. But it also meant he was now in danger. Using his old detective skills, James began surveillance of the staff member he'd seen taking money. Thomas Hartwell had worked at the palace for 8 years, starting as a junior aide and working his way up to assistant to the private secretary. His salary was modest by London standards, yet James had observed him wearing expensive watches and driving a car far beyond his apparent means. Following Hartwell after his work shift, James discovered the man's routine included regular stops at an upscale wine bar in Mayfair. The kind of place where conversations could be easily overheard if you knew how to position yourself correctly. James arrived at the wine bar an hour before Hartwell usually appeared, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. He ordered dinner and settled in to wait, looking like just another businessman unwinding after work. When Hartwell arrived, he wasn't alone. The mysterious man from the palace gate sat across from him, and they spoke in hushed tones. James couldn't hear their exact words, but he could read body language. Money changed hands again, and Hartwell passed over what looked like documents or photographs. More importantly, James managed to take several clear photos with his phone. He now had evidence of ongoing contact between a palace insider and an unknown individual conducting what appeared to be paid transactions. After the men parted ways, James followed the mysterious stranger. The man led him through several streets before entering an expensive apartment building in Knightsbridge. James noted the address and decided to research the building's residents later. Back in his small flat that evening, James spread out everything he knew on his kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle. Photos, notes, timeline of events, staff schedules he remembered from his years of service. A pattern was emerging, but he needed more information to understand what he was really looking at. His laptop research revealed that the Knightsbridge building housed several foreign businessmen and at least 2 people with diplomatic connections. One name stood out: Viktor Petrov, listed as a cultural attaché but known in intelligence circles as someone with much deeper connections to foreign interests. The pieces were starting to form a disturbing picture. Someone was paying palace staff for information or access. But what kind of information? Security details? Private royal schedules? Personal conversations? Family secrets? James realized he needed help from someone still inside the palace. But reaching out to former colleagues was risky. Most of them had families and careers to protect. They wouldn't jeopardize their positions to help a dismissed guard, no matter how legitimate his concerns might be. Then he remembered Sarah Collins, a palace cleaner who had worked there even longer than he had. Sarah was invisible to most staff and visitors, which meant she saw everything without being noticed. She was also honest to a fault, and had mentioned being worried about strange goings-on during their brief conversations over the years. The next morning, James waited near the staff entrance of the palace, hoping to catch Sarah during her break. Security cameras covered the area, but he positioned himself where former employees often lingered, making his presence less suspicious. Sarah appeared right on schedule, looking nervous as she approached him. "James, I heard what happened. Everyone's talking about how suddenly you were let go. No one understands why. Sarah, I need to ask you something important, but not here. Can you meet me for coffee later? It's about things I noticed before I was dismissed. Things that might be dangerous." She glanced around nervously. "I've been worried too. Some of the staff are acting different lately, more secretive, and there have been visitors in areas where visitors shouldn't be allowed." They agreed to meet at a cafe far from the palace later that afternoon. When Sarah arrived, she looked scared but determined. "James, something's not right inside the palace. I've been cleaning offices where I found papers left out that looked important. Not royal family personal stuff, but security protocols, staff schedules, information about who visits when. And I've seen Thomas Hartwell copying things he shouldn't have access to." "What kind of things?" "Documents from the king's private meetings, phone logs, even floor plans of areas most staff never see. When I accidentally walked in on him once, he got angry and told me to forget what I saw. But I remember everything." James felt his pulse quicken. This was bigger than simple corruption or selling royal gossip to tabloids. Someone was conducting systematic intelligence gathering from inside Buckingham Palace itself. "Sarah, this is serious. We're talking about possible espionage. You could be in danger just for noticing these things." "I know," she whispered. "But I love this country and the royal family. If someone's trying to hurt them, I want to help stop it." James made a decision that would change both their lives. "Then we're going to need proof. Real evidence that can't be dismissed or covered up. Are you willing to help me get it?" Sarah nodded despite the fear in her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" As James outlined his plan, he knew they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. But the alternative, letting foreign agents potentially compromise the monarchy, was unthinkable. The game was becoming more dangerous, but the stakes were too high to quit now. The plan James and Sarah developed was risky but necessary. Sarah would use her cleaning access to photograph documents and observe meetings while James conducted external surveillance of the people involved. They communicated through encrypted messaging apps and met only in different public locations each time. Over the following week, Sarah's discoveries painted an alarming picture. Thomas Hartwell wasn't working alone. At least 3 other palace staff members were involved in whatever operation was taking place. They included a security technician who had access to camera systems, a communications specialist who handled phone and internet systems, and surprisingly, someone from the royal kitchen staff who could observe private family meals and conversations. The documents Sarah photographed revealed the scope of information being gathered: security camera schedules showing blind spots and shift changes, detailed floor plans marking private family quarters and safe rooms, communication logs showing who the royal family contacted and when, personal schedule information including medical appointments, private meetings, and family gatherings. Most disturbing of all were handwritten notes describing private conversations. Someone was recording or remembering personal discussions between family members, including sensitive topics about health, relationships, and political opinions never meant for public knowledge. James realized they were dealing with a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been running for months, possibly years. The foreign connection through Viktor Petrov suggested state-sponsored espionage, but he needed more proof before taking this information to authorities. His surveillance of Petrov revealed regular meetings with other foreign nationals at various locations around London. James photographed license plates, faces, and meeting locations, slowly building a comprehensive picture of the network involved. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered a hidden camera in the king's private study. While cleaning late one evening, she noticed a tiny device that definitely hadn't been there the previous week. It was professionally installed, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "James, this changes everything," Sarah told him during their emergency meeting in a crowded shopping mall. "They're not just stealing documents anymore. They're recording private conversations in the king's most secure space." James felt a chill run down his spine. If foreign agents had access to the king's private conversations, they could learn state secrets, personal vulnerabilities, family problems, and political strategies. The potential for blackmail or strategic advantage was enormous. "We need to move fast," James decided. This has gone beyond simple espionage. They're compromising national security. But their investigation was about to take a dangerous turn. That evening, as Sarah was leaving the palace after her shift, two men approached her in the parking area. They weren't palace security. James had taught her to recognize all the legitimate security personnel. "Ms. Collins," one of them said politely, "we'd like to have a word with you about your recent activities." Sarah's heart pounded, but she tried to stay calm. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. I just clean offices." "We know about your photography hobby," the second man said, showing her a photo on his phone. It was a picture of her taking pictures of documents in Thomas Hartwell's office. "We also know about your meetings with former Royal Guard James Mitchell." Sarah realized she was trapped. These men knew everything about her investigation with James. They had been watching both of them. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We want you to stop asking questions and stop taking pictures. We want you to tell your friend James that his curiosity could be very dangerous for his health. Do you understand what we're saying?" "Are you threatening me?" "We're giving you friendly advice. Some secrets are too big for cleaning ladies and dismissed guards to handle. Walk away now and nothing bad happens to either of you." After the men left, Sarah immediately called James using their secure communication method. They met within an hour at a 24-hour diner, both knowing their investigation had reached a critical point. "They know everything," Sarah told him, her hands shaking as she described the encounter. "They have photos of me taking pictures. They know about our meetings." "James, I'm scared." James was angry but not surprised. This proves we're onto something huge. They wouldn't threaten us unless we were close to exposing something that could seriously damage them. But what can we do now? They're watching us, and I could lose my job or worse. James had been thinking about this possibility. "We have two choices. We can walk away and pretend we never discovered any of this, letting them continue their operation, or we can gather all our evidence and take it to someone with enough authority and security clearance to act on it. Who would believe us? And who can we trust?" "I've been thinking about that. There's someone I worked with years ago before joining the Royal Guard. Detective Chief Inspector Amanda Price. She's now with the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Unit. She has the clearance to investigate this properly and the authority to protect us if we're in danger." Sarah considered this carefully. What if she thinks we're conspiracy theorists? What if she doesn't believe us? Then we show her the evidence. The photos, the documents, the surveillance footage I've been gathering, the pattern of meetings, the money exchanges, the camera in the king's study. Even if she's skeptical at first, the evidence will speak for itself. They spent the next 2 hours organizing all their evidence into a comprehensive file. Photos of suspicious meetings, copies of documents showing security protocols being compromised, surveillance images of foreign nationals, and detailed notes about timeline and personnel involved. James also prepared a written statement explaining his dismissal and the circumstances that led to his investigation. He included his 15 years of service record and his previous detective experience to establish his credibility. "Tomorrow morning I'm taking everything to DCI Price," James decided. "This is bigger than we can handle alone, and those threats tonight proved we're running out of time." Sarah nodded, though she still looked frightened. "What about my job? What if they retaliate against me? If our suspicions are correct, your job will be the least of anyone's worries. We're talking about foreign espionage against the British monarchy. The security services will have to act." As they prepared to leave the diner, both James and Sarah understood that their quiet lives were about to change dramatically. They had uncovered what appeared to be a serious threat to national security, but proving it and surviving the consequences would test them in ways they never imagined. The evidence was compelling, but the people they were investigating had already shown they were willing to use intimidation, and possibly violence to protect their operation. Tomorrow would determine whether James and Sarah were heroes uncovering a genuine threat, or whether they had stumbled into something far more dangerous than they realized. Detective Chief Inspector Amanda Price sat across from James Mitchell in a secure interview room at New Scotland Yard, studying the evidence spread across the table between them. 20 years in law enforcement had taught her to be skeptical of conspiracy theories. But the documentation James presented was disturbingly comprehensive and professional. "Let me understand this correctly," Amanda said, reviewing the photographs Sarah had taken. "You believe there's an active espionage operation running inside Buckingham Palace, involving multiple staff members and coordinated by foreign agents?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," James replied. "And I believe my dismissal was orchestrated to remove someone who was getting too close to discovering it." Amanda picked up one of the photos showing Thomas Hartwell passing documents to Victor Petrov. "You've identified this man as Petrov, the cultural attaché. We've had our eye on him for other reasons. His diplomatic activities don't always match his official cultural duties." This confirmation gave James hope that his evidence would be taken seriously. "DCI Price, I served faithfully for 15 years. I wouldn't bring this to you unless I was certain something serious was happening." "I believe you. James, the question is how deep this goes and who else might be involved." Amanda's expression grew grim as she examined photos of the hidden camera Sarah had discovered. Installing surveillance equipment in the monarch's private study is an act of war if foreign agents are responsible. Over the next 2 hours, Amanda questioned James about every detail of his investigation. She took particular interest in the timeline of events, the pattern of meetings, and the specific documents that had been compromised. "We need to bring in your friend Sarah for formal questioning," Amanda decided. "Her testimony and the photographs she took will be crucial evidence. But first we need to ensure her safety." "She's terrified," James admitted. "Those men who approached her made it clear that continuing the investigation could be dangerous for both of us." "Which confirms that you've uncovered something significant. People don't make threats unless they have something serious to hide." Amanda stood up, gathering the evidence. "I'm going to brief my superior and initiate a formal counterintelligence investigation. This will now involve MI5 and possibly MI6. James felt relief mixed with apprehension. His evidence was being taken seriously, but he also understood that once the security services became involved, he and Sarah would be entering a world where their personal safety couldn't be guaranteed. "What happens next?" he asked. "We conduct covert surveillance of the individuals you've identified while building a comprehensive case. We'll also need to determine how many people inside the palace are compromised and what information has been leaked." Amanda's phone buzzed with an urgent message. After reading it, her expression became even more serious. "James, we may have less time than I thought. Intelligence chatter suggests something significant is being planned for next week. If this espionage ring is connected to that chatter, we need to act quickly." That afternoon, Amanda arranged for Sarah to be brought to a safe location for debriefing. The cleaner arrived nervous but determined to tell everything she knew. Her detailed knowledge of palace operations and her observations of suspicious activities provided crucial insight into how the espionage network operated. "They've been incredibly careful," Sarah explained. "Nothing obvious that would trigger security reviews. They rotate who takes what information, use different methods each time, and never seem to communicate with each other directly inside the palace." "But you noticed patterns," Amanda observed. "Yes. Certain documents would be left out overnight, then be perfectly filed the next morning. Security camera maintenance would happen more frequently than scheduled. Staff members would work late more often than their jobs required." Amanda took detailed notes while recording Sarah's statement. The picture emerging was of a sophisticated, long-term operation designed to gather comprehensive intelligence about royal family activities, security procedures, and government connections. Meanwhile, James was working with a surveillance team to identify all members of the espionage network. His inside knowledge of palace operations helped investigators understand how the security breaches had occurred without triggering existing counterintelligence protocols. "The thing about palace security," James explained to the team, "is that it's designed to keep threats out, not to monitor threats that are already inside with legitimate access." By evening, the investigation had expanded to include specialized units from multiple agencies. The scope of the potential security breach was staggering. Foreign agents had potentially been accessing the most sensitive information about the British monarchy for months or years. Amanda received another urgent update that changed everything. Intercepted communications suggested that the espionage ring was preparing to execute some kind of operation during a major royal event scheduled for the following week. The exact nature of the threat wasn't clear, but the timing suggested it would be public and designed for maximum impact. "We can't wait for a complete investigation," Amanda told her superior. "We need to move against the known participants immediately." The decision was made to conduct coordinated arrests of Thomas Hartwell and the other identified palace staff members that night, while simultaneously moving against Viktor Petrov and his associates. James and Sarah were placed under protective custody as key witnesses, but they were allowed to observe the arrests from a secure location, watching Thomas. Hartwell being taken into custody felt surreal to James. A man he had worked alongside for years was being arrested for espionage against the crown. The arrests revealed the true scope of the operation. Searches of the suspects' homes uncovered sophisticated communication equipment, large amounts of cash, and detailed intelligence files about royal family members that went back several years. Most shocking was the discovery of contingency plans for various scenarios, including detailed emergency procedures for royal family movements, security response protocols, and backup communication systems. This wasn't just intelligence gathering, it was preparation for some kind of direct action against the monarchy. Viktor Petrov's arrest at his Knightsbridge apartment yielded additional evidence of coordination with other foreign operatives across Europe. The espionage ring was part of a larger international operation targeting multiple European monarchies and governments. "James," Amanda told him, as they reviewed the evidence seized during the arrests, "your vigilance and decision to investigate may have prevented something catastrophic. The intelligence we've gathered suggests they were planning something during next week's state banquet." "What kind of something?" "We're still analyzing their communications, but it appears they were preparing for either a major intelligence coup or some kind of direct action. Either way, having detailed security protocols and emergency procedures would have given them a significant advantage." James felt a mixture of vindication and horror. His dismissal from the Royal Guard had led to uncovering a serious threat to national security. But the scope of that threat was larger than he had imagined. The investigation was far from over, but the immediate danger had been neutralized. However, James was about to learn that catching the operatives was only the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous story. The interrogations began immediately after the arrests, and within hours, the true magnitude of the conspiracy started to emerge. Thomas Hartwell, faced with overwhelming evidence, decided to cooperate rather than face decades in prison for espionage. It started small. Hartwell confessed during his recorded interview with Amanda and MI5 agents. "They approached me 2 years ago. Said they were journalists working on a documentary about royal security. They offered good money just for basic information about schedules and procedures. But it escalated," Amanda pressed. "Yes. Once they had something on me, they demanded more sensitive material, security protocols, family medical information, private communications. They said if I refused, they would expose my earlier cooperation and I'd lose everything anyway." James watched the interrogation from an observation room, feeling disgusted by Hartwell's betrayal, but also understanding how the man had been manipulated into deeper involvement. "Who was your primary contact?" the MI5 agent asked. "Viktor Petrov, but he wasn't making the decisions. He answered to someone else, someone he called the director. I never met this person, but Petrov was clearly afraid of disappointing them." This revelation opened up an entirely new dimension to the investigation. The espionage ring extended beyond the individuals already arrested. Someone with significant authority was coordinating the operation, and that person was still at large. Viktor Petrov proved less cooperative during his interrogation, maintaining his diplomatic immunity claims and refusing to provide information about his superiors or the ultimate purpose of the intelligence gathering. However, analysis of encrypted communications found on Petrov's devices revealed coded references to Operation Crown Jewel and specific dates that aligned with major royal events over the coming months. They weren't just gathering intelligence for blackmail or general information, Amanda explained to James during a briefing. This was preparation for something specific and time-sensitive. Meanwhile, the security review at Buckingham Palace uncovered additional surveillance devices and security vulnerabilities that the espionage ring had exploited. The full extent of the information compromise was staggering. They had access to everything, the palace security chief reported. Medical records, financial information, private family conversations, security protocols, emergency procedures, and personal relationship details going back years. King Charles was briefed on the investigation's findings, and his reaction was swift and decisive. The entire palace security apparatus would be overhauled. All staff would undergo new background checks, and additional counterintelligence measures would be implemented immediately. But there was also the question of James's dismissal. During a private meeting with Amanda and senior security officials, the king learned about the sequence of events that led to the investigation. Detective Inspector Mitchell was dismissed for investigating suspicious activities that turned out to be genuine espionage, Amanda reported. His vigilance and subsequent investigation prevented what could have been a serious security breach or worse. King Charles's expression grew thoughtful as he considered the implications. Am I to understand that dismissing him actually led to uncovering this threat? Yes, Your Majesty. If he had remained in position and been warned off his investigation, we might never have discovered the extent of the espionage operation. The investigation took another dramatic turn when communications analysis revealed that Operation Crown Jewel was scheduled to culminate during the upcoming state visit from a major European head of government. The espionage ring had been gathering intelligence to compromise security during this high-profile international event. This was never about selling royal gossip to tabloids, James realized as he reviewed the evidence. They were planning something that would embarrass or compromise both the British monarchy and visiting foreign dignitaries. Amanda nodded grimly. The intelligence suggests they were preparing to either steal sensitive information during the state visit or create some kind of public incident that would damage international relations. The scope of potential damage was enormous. A successful operation during a state visit could affect diplomatic relationships, trade agreements, and security partnerships between multiple nations. We need to identify the director before the state visit, Amanda decided. Petrov and Hartwell were just operational level. Someone with much higher authority planned this entire operation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah, while giving additional testimony about her observations, remembered overhearing a phone conversation in which Hartwell mentioned meeting someone at the old place where we first discussed the investigation of Hartwell's movements during his early period of recruitment led authorities to a private club in central London that catered to diplomats and international business executives. Surveillance footage from 2 years earlier showed Hartwell meeting not with Petrov, but with a woman who was identified as Elena Volkov, a supposed art dealer with connections to several European embassies. Further investigation revealed that Volkov had been operating under multiple identities across Europe, always involved in cultural or business activities that gave her access to government and royal circles. She was the director they had been seeking. Elena Volkov is a professional intelligence operative with over a decade of experience in operations targeting European governments, MI6 reported. She's been running similar operations in France, Spain, and Germany. The international scope of Volkov's activities prompted coordination with intelligence services across Europe. The espionage ring wasn't just targeting Britain, it was part of a coordinated campaign against European monarchies and governments. James, Amanda told him as they prepared for the next phase of the operation, your decision to investigate those suspicious activities at the palace has uncovered an international espionage network. This goes far beyond anything we initially suspected, but locating Elena Volkov proved challenging. She had disappeared from her known addresses immediately after the arrests of Petrov and Hartwell, suggesting she had advance warning that the operation was compromised. She's still out there, Amanda realized, and she knows we're onto the operation. That makes her extremely dangerous. The state visit was only days away, and despite the arrests and security overhaul, the possibility remained that Volkov had additional assets in place or alternative plans ready to execute. James felt the weight of responsibility as he realized that his investigation had prevented one threat but potentially triggered an even more dangerous response from a professional intelligence operative, who now had nothing to lose. The game was far from over, and the most dangerous player was still on the board with the highest stakes event of the year, rapidly approaching. With Elena Volkov still at large and the state visit approaching, security agencies across Europe coordinated the largest counterintelligence operation in decades. James found himself at the center of preparations, his insider knowledge of palace operations making him invaluable to the security planning team. "She'll try to salvage something from this operation," Amanda explained during an emergency briefing. "Volkov has spent years building this network. She won't walk away empty-handed." Intelligence analysts worked around the clock to identify potential backup plans Volkov might have prepared. The discovery of additional encrypted communications suggested she had contingency operations ready, but the specific details remained hidden behind sophisticated encryption. James was assigned to work with the new palace security team, helping them understand how the original espionage network had operated and what vulnerabilities might still exist. Walking back into Buckingham Palace felt surreal after everything that had happened. "The irony isn't lost on me," he told Sarah during one of their debriefings. "I was dismissed for being too vigilant, and now they need that vigilance to protect against the very threat I was trying to uncover." Sarah had been given temporary leave from her cleaning duties while security reviewed all palace personnel, but she remained involved in the investigation as a key witness and observer. Her detailed knowledge of staff routines and building layouts proved crucial for identifying potential security gaps. "I keep thinking about all the conversations I overheard, all the small things that seemed odd at the time," Sarah reflected. "How many other signs did we miss over the years?" The investigation revealed that Volkov's network had been operating for at least 3 years, gradually expanding their access and intelligence gathering capabilities. The scope of information they had collected was staggering. Detailed personal profiles of royal family members, comprehensive security protocols, diplomatic communication patterns, and even psychological assessments based on observed behavior. This wasn't just espionage, James realized as he reviewed the intelligence files. They were building comprehensive profiles for something much more targeted and personal. The breakthrough came when cryptographers finally cracked some of Volkov's encrypted communications. The messages revealed that Operation Crown Jewel had multiple phases, and the arrests had only disrupted the intelligence gathering phase. The operational phase was still scheduled to proceed during the state visit. "She's planning to use the information they've already gathered to create a major diplomatic incident," Amanda explained to the Joint Security Council. "Something that will embarrass both governments and potentially destabilize international relationships." The decrypted messages referenced specific personal information about both the royal family and the visiting head of state that could be weaponized for maximum political damage. Details about private disagreements, family tensions, health concerns, and personal relationships that could be exposed at precisely the wrong moment to create maximum chaos. James studied the communications with growing alarm. "She's not just planning to steal information or compromise security. She's planning to destroy reputations and relationships that took decades to build." 2 days before the state visit, surveillance teams finally located one of Volkov's safe houses in a wealthy London suburb. The raid yielded additional intelligence about her current plans, but also confirmed their worst fears. She had recruited new assets specifically for the operational phase. "She's brought in professionals," MI5 reported, "people with no connection to the original network, no prior intelligence footprint. Clean operators who can move freely during the state visit." The evidence found at the safe house included detailed floor plans of venues where state visit events would take place, security camera positions, staff schedules, and most troubling of all, personal items belonging to palace staff members who weren't part of the original espionage ring. "She's been watching and preparing backup recruitment targets," Amanda realized, "people she could pressure or blackmail if her primary network was compromised." James felt sick as he recognized some of the names and photos found at the safe house. These were people he had worked with for years, loyal employees who had been targeted simply because their positions or personal circumstances made them vulnerable to manipulation. "We need to warn them," James insisted. "They don't even know they're in danger." The security team made the difficult decision to approach the targeted individuals discreetly, offering protection in exchange for cooperation. Most were shocked to learn they had been under surveillance, but several revealed that they had indeed been approached by strangers offering money for information or assistance. "A woman called me last week," one of the palace gardeners reported, said she was writing a book about royal gardens and wanted to interview staff. Offered £5,000 for a few hours of conversation. I thought it was suspicious and didn't respond. That was Elena Volkov, Amanda confirmed. She was trying to recruit you as a last-minute asset. With less than 24 hours until the state visit began, the security situation was unlike anything the palace had ever experienced. Every staff member was being monitored. Every visitor was being extensively screened. And counter-surveillance teams were positioned throughout London. But Volkov remained elusive, and intelligence suggested she was preparing for a final attempt to salvage her operation. Intercepted communications indicated she was planning something during the state banquet, the most high-profile event of the visit. "The banquet is perfect for her purposes," James explained to the security team. "Maximum media coverage, both heads of state present, and an environment where even a small disruption would create international headlines." Amanda agreed with his assessment. She doesn't need to cause physical harm to achieve her objectives. Just creating chaos at the right moment, with the right information being revealed, could accomplish her goals. The evening of the state banquet, James was positioned with the security team monitoring the event from a command center filled with surveillance screens showing every angle of the palace dining room. Hundreds of guests, dozens of staff members, and extensive media coverage created countless opportunities for a determined operative to cause disruption. "Remember," Amanda addressed the team, "Volkov is a professional. She won't try anything obvious or dramatic. She'll wait for the perfect moment when maximum damage can be achieved with minimum risk." As the banquet proceeded smoothly through its early courses, James began to wonder if perhaps their security measures had been successful in deterring Volkov's plans. The guests were enjoying themselves. Both heads of state were engaging in pleasant diplomatic conversation, and everything appeared normal. Then Sarah, who was monitoring communications from the palace staff areas, noticed something troubling. James, one of the kitchen staff members, isn't responding to radio calls. Her location badge shows she's in the kitchen, but supervisors can't find her. James felt his heart rate spike. "Who is it?" "Maria Santos. She's worked in the palace for 6 years, completely clean background check, but what? Her daughter attends university in Prague. Very expensive tuition that would be difficult on a palace kitchen salary." The pieces fell into place with terrifying clarity. Volkov had found someone with financial pressure and family abroad, the perfect combination for leverage. Maria Santos had likely been recruited or coerced into cooperation, and now she was missing during the most critical event. "She's inside," James realized. Volkov found a way to get someone inside the banquet itself. The security team mobilized immediately upon realizing Maria Santos was missing. Palace security began a systematic search, while the banquet continued under the watchful eyes of undercover agents. Positioned throughout the dining room, we can't disrupt the banquet without solid proof of an immediate threat, Amanda decided. But we need to locate Maria Santos and determine what Volkov has planned. James studied the palace layouts, thinking like both a former guard and a former detective. If I were planning to disrupt the banquet, I wouldn't try to get into the dining room itself. Too much security, too many cameras. I'd target something that supports the event. Like what? Communication systems, lighting controls, or... James paused as a horrible thought occurred to him. The kitchen. All the food and drink for the banquet comes from there. The search team rushed to the kitchen areas while James coordinated with the security command center. They found Maria Santos in a storage room, unconscious but alive. Next to her was a sophisticated recording device and what appeared to be a small listening device designed to be hidden in serving dishes. She was drugged, the medical team reported. Probably chloroform or something similar. She's been unconscious for at least 30 minutes. James examined the recording device while Amanda questioned the kitchen supervisors about the evening's procedures. The device contained hours of recorded conversations between kitchen staff, including detailed discussions about which dishes were being served, to which guests and the exact timing of each course. Volkov was using Maria to gather real-time intelligence about the banquet. James realized, she knows exactly when each course will be served and who will be eating what. But the discovery of the listening device suggested something more sinister. If Volkov could hide surveillance equipment in serving dishes, she could potentially hide other devices or substances as well. "We need to check every dish before it goes out," Amanda ordered. Everything gets inspected. The kitchen staff worked frantically with security teams to examine every plate, glass, and serving utensil. The process caused delays in the banquet service, but the guests remained unaware of the security crisis unfolding behind the scenes. Then one of the security technicians made a disturbing discovery. A small device hidden inside a decorative flower arrangement, destined for the head table, contained not just surveillance equipment, but also a tiny capsule of what appeared to be a chemical substance. "It's not poison," the chemical analysis team reported quickly. "It's a synthetic compound that produces a strong, distinctive odor when activated, probably triggered by body heat or contact with food." James understood immediately. It's not meant to harm anyone physically. It's designed to create a disruption at exactly the right moment. Amanda nodded grimly. Imagine if that device activated while both heads of state were eating, creating a terrible smell that would force evacuation of the dining room. The media coverage would be devastating. But finding the listening device meant Volkov knew her plan had been discovered. Intelligence intercepted frantic encrypted communications suggesting she was preparing to activate backup plans. She's desperate now, Amanda realized, which makes her even more dangerous. The banquet was now in its final course, and security teams had swept every area multiple times. Just as it seemed they had successfully prevented Volkov's disruption plans, Sarah noticed something in the staff monitoring systems. "James, there's a catering van outside that wasn't scheduled to be here tonight. It arrived about 10 minutes ago and the driver is still inside." Through surveillance cameras, they could see a woman in catering uniform sitting in the van, apparently monitoring something on a laptop computer. Even from the distant camera angle, James recognized her from intelligence photos. "That's Elena Volkov," he confirmed. "She's right outside the palace." The realization hit them simultaneously. If Volkov was outside monitoring the situation, she might have other devices inside that hadn't been discovered yet. Or worse, she might be preparing to activate something remotely. "All guests need to be evacuated immediately," Amanda decided. "We can't take any more risks." But as security teams prepared to implement emergency evacuation procedures, James had another thought. "Wait. If we evacuate now, she wins. The media will report that a state banquet was disrupted due to security threats. That might be exactly what she wants, to prove that British security can be compromised." Amanda considered this carefully. "What do you suggest?" "Let me approach her van. I know her face, she doesn't know mine. If I can get close enough, maybe I can determine what she's really planning." It was risky, but with the banquet nearly concluded and guests beginning to move to the reception areas, time was running out for whatever Volkov had planned. James approached the catering van carefully, wearing kitchen staff clothing to blend in with other personnel moving around the palace grounds. As he got closer, he could hear Volkov speaking urgently on a phone in what sounded like Russian. From his position behind nearby vehicles, James could see her laptop screen showing surveillance feeds from inside the palace. She was monitoring the banquet in real time, watching for the perfect moment to execute whatever backup plan she had prepared. Then James saw something that made his blood run cold. On her laptop screen was a timer counting down, and it showed less than 5 minutes remaining. Whatever Volkov had planned, it was about to happen whether her other devices had been found or not. James immediately radioed Amanda with the information. "She has a timer running. Less than 5 minutes. We need to move now." Security teams surrounded the van while James maintained his observation position. When they approached, Volkov immediately tried to activate something on her laptop, but counter-surveillance specialists had been jamming her communications for the past several minutes. As Volkov was taken into custody, she smiled coldly at the arresting officers. "You're too late," she said in accented English. "The damage is already done." The final twist came when investigators examined Volkov's laptop and discovered that her real plan had been far more subtle than anyone had imagined. She hadn't been planning to disrupt the banquet itself. She had been recording everything that happened, using the surveillance devices and information gathered over 3 years to create a comprehensive intelligence profile that would be sold to foreign governments. The banquet was never the target, James realized as he reviewed the evidence. It was the prize. She used all the intelligence her network gathered to create the most complete picture possible of British royal security, diplomatic procedures, and personal relationships. But thanks to James's original vigilance and the subsequent investigation, Volkov's 3-year operation had been completely compromised. Instead of achieving her intelligence objectives, she had exposed an international espionage network and prevented a significant breach of national security. King Charles personally thanked James and Sarah for their service to the crown, acknowledging that their courage and dedication had protected both the monarchy and the nation's security. Detective Inspector Mitchell, the king said during a private ceremony, "Your dismissal was based on incomplete information and poor judgment. I hope you will consider returning to royal service, with my personal assurance that vigilant guards who protect the crown will always have my support." James accepted the reinstatement, knowing that his experience had fundamentally changed how palace security operated. Sarah received recognition for her crucial role in the investigation, and both became part of an enhanced security awareness program designed to prevent future infiltration attempts. The espionage network that had taken 3 years to build was dismantled in 3 weeks, but the lessons learned would protect the British monarchy for generations to come. Sometimes, James reflected, being dismissed from your job was the best thing that could happen, not just for you, but for everyone you were sworn to protect.